Metropolis is a sci-fi drama set in the future in the world's richest and most technologically advanced city known as Metropolis. Here people live alongside with robots, but they are far from equal. Robots here are actually treated as slaves. They can only go where they can work. They can pretty much only work, and they don't even get names, so they're basically slaves here. People's opinions on these robots differ greatly. There are some people who love the robots and they think that they're great for the economy, and then there are others who don't really like them because the robots take over people's jobs. In the beginning of this movie, we see a private investigator and his son entering the city of Metropolis in search for a scientist who's wanted for doing human experiments and also organ trafficking. Here we learn about the differences between Metropolis and the rest of the world because Kenichi and his father have never even seen a robot before, and this city is filled with them. Within this city, there is a political faction known as the Marduks. They're funded by a very wealthy citizen, Duke Red. Duke Red recently finished building this massive structure known as the Ziggurat, which is meant to keep Metropolis being the most powerful city in the world. The Marduks are mostly anti-robot, wanting to get rid of the robots and give all of the jobs back to people, and they have their fair share of extremists on their side as well. One thing that I really liked about this movie was when Kenichi and his father first enter the city, you could really see that it's this thriving world because people have a lot of problems and there are these political issues, and then there's a lot of corruption within the government and elsewhere as well. So I really like the fact that all of this wasn't put on hold to address the goal that the main character has. I really like that because you see the characters here going through this city which is changing on its own, really having little to do with the actions of the protagonist here, so I really like that, and it made me feel like this city was actually alive and it was an evolving story. The biggest influence that the protagonist Kenichi has on this plot is with this secret robot commissioned by Duke Red, built by this scientist that they actually chase into the city, and it takes the shape of a young girl, and she's actually the most advanced robot out there. Kenichi meets Tima, the special robot, during this fire at this abandoned facility, which was actually the secret place where this scientist was building the robot after an attack by Duke Red's own adopted son. Duke Red's adopted son, Rock, really does a great job of making me feel like he is that big antagonist within the movie, but he really isn't. It's just that he's very annoying and he messes a lot of things up for the plot just because he has this blind aggression to him because he's so young and so ignorant, and he really would do anything for his father despite the fact that Duke Red really treats him bad. He'll call him his dad and he'll slam his fist on the table and say, "Don't you call me your father. I adopted you because you were an orphan on the street after a war." And, you know, he really doesn't care for him so much, but he is still trying to fight to protect his father. There are plenty of villainous characters within this movie aside from Rock, who I really don't think is that big of a villain within this movie, and I think it's pretty subjective because depending on how you see this movie and how you feel about it, you could feel different ways about the character of Rock because there are so many villains within this movie, such as Duke Red and also the mayor of Metropolis and a few other characters here as well, that when you look at Rock and when you look at Kenichi, they are really the only characters, and of course Kenichi's father, who aren't just looking out for themselves. We've got Kenichi, who's looking out for Tima and also his father, and we have Rock, who's looking out for his father. That's all of the plot that I'm going to get into with this. There's more that happens, but I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet, but I will say that this does have a touching and beautiful ending to it. Now, Metropolis actually has a pretty big background to it. First of all, there was the original movie, which was a silent film from 1927, which inspired Osamu Tezuka to create his one-volume-long manga Metropolis, which was inspired from that, and that inspired this movie here, which was directed by Rentaro, who also directed Galaxy Express 999, Captain Harlock, and also Clamps X 1999, and the story is written by Katsuhiro Omoto, who you know from Akira and Steam Boy, so this is really an all-star picture here. The presentation of this movie is actually a representation representation of the type of story that Metropolis is trying to tell, which is a mixture of new and old. The character designs look like something ripped right out of an Osamu Tezuka manga because they've got the big heads and the big eyes, and they really look very old, but then they actually have pretty good quality to them as well. But then looking at the scenery in the background, all of that is pre-rendered CGI, and a lot of that reminds me of these older RPGs with the pre-rendered backgrounds to them, and I think it looks good. I think it looks really good, but this is from 2001, so of course any sort of computer animated or computer designed backgrounds that we're going to have here, sometimes they look really good and it didn't really look like they aged too bad, but then there are other times when you could really tell the age of this film by looking at the background, and overall I have to say that this is a beautiful piece of work here. It's got beautiful animation to it, but we need this to be remastered on Blu-ray, potentially change up some of the backgrounds, because sometimes you could really see that it looked like there are these anime cells, these character cells that are on top of this background, which is completely different, and it almost looks like they're floating there. So I really think that they could open this up and do a little bit more work and release this on Blu-ray or something. I think that would be great. The audio here is also really interesting as well, because it's also a mixture of new and old. There's this jazz here, and I was really thrown off by hearing this, and I like that it's there because it really changes things up a bit, but it really reminds me of the intro to Fallout 3, that type of like old jazzy music, and I think it was really interesting that they added this here. Now, as far as the voice acting goes, I recommend you to watch this with the English dub. Sure, watch it in Japanese too if you want to, but this does have a good English dub to it. It's got an all-star cast of some of the most popular voice actors out there, and because this is a bit older, from 2001, you can actually hear the difference in their voice acting skill. Like if you look at some of their newer work, of course they're better now, but just because this is old, it doesn't mean that they were really bad or anything, so I definitely recommend you to watch this with the English dub. Giving Metropolis an overall score is pretty difficult because of its animation. For its time, Metropolis was beautiful. For something out of 2001, this was jaw-dropping, I'm sure. But for now, seeing as how technology is advanced and CGI is so beautiful now, this really has aged poorly. So I really can't give it a negative rating because of this, because for its time, it was amazing, and I can't fault it just for coming out at a certain time. So I'm really going to overlook the animation as a whole, despite the fact that I do think that this is a beautiful animated movie. But as far as the story goes, I would have to say that I would give this an 8.5, because it's a really good story, but it is pretty long, and also it does have a few pacing issues just because there's so much at play here that you've got to learn about all these different characters, and you have to see this world evolve, which I felt to be very interesting, but still, it is really long, and I think some people might find a pacing issue there with that. So 8.5, it's a great movie. Go check this out. So anyways, if you've seen Metropolis, and or if you've read the manga or seen the original silent film, let me know your thoughts about those in the comment section below. Let me know how you think they compare and which are your favorites. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to comment, subscribe, like, and also share it with your friends. I really appreciate all that. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later.